Welcome to the Digital Lifestyle Show, show 759. This week on the show, we've got lots to fit in. Richard and Garry are here. We're going to talk about the Apple announcements on their change of processors and what that means for Windows users, and their user interface changes and whether Microsoft can do the same, and we'll talk about their interface changes as well, whether it's a bit Windows Phone-like. We'll be talking about the jump forward for the Windows Insider program on the Fast Ring, the dev channel, what that's going to mean for Windows Insiders. Is it going to open up some new potential features for us? Let's hope so. We'll be talking about the Acer event that happened this week, parallels, teams, and lots more. So let's get straight to Richard and Garry. Garry and Richard, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Garry, we've not put your video on for a moment, just while your bandwidth sorts itself out, but we'll see if it picks up. You can drop it back on.
Yeah, we'll try that a bit later to see what's happening. Yeah. So I'm sure someone's doing some intensive gaming somewhere nearby because we're having all sorts of bandwidth issues the last few days.
Yeah, they're probably some bit torrenting.
Or they might be downloading
like
new builds of certain fruity operating systems.
Oh, there could be that, yes.
What fruity operating systems would there be?
Couldn't possibly comment without drinking.
Well, get your drinks ready because I'm going to be asking you about Apple event and what the highlights were there, including the processor switch. So I'm going to ask you about that and what type of processor they're using actually. We have got some Windows Insider news, a bit of a leap on build numbers. We can be talking about any good stuff for Linux users, maybe what that's going to mean for us going forward for the Insider program. A little bit about Teams as well. I've been playing around with the free version Teams today. There was an Acer event today. I cut bits of it. I don't know, Garry, did you see some bits of that?
Yeah, I watched that. That was quite an interesting event. Nothing majorly new, but there are a couple of nice things. Quite an interesting emphasis on rugged devices they were putting out. So that seemed to be their big thrust this year, to make rugged devices usable.
Okay.
Quite good.
We'll talk about that.
So yeah, so some good stuff there, and a nice artistic laptop as well, which I thought was quite clever.
Yeah, and we've got some stuff in parallels as well. So we've got and I want to talk about Mixer as well.
Oh
yes.
I think you need to get
Richard.
I think you need to slide the Simon Bates tune on for that.
Oh, is it? Yeah, it's Simon Bates.
Definitely is. Sadly, yeah.
Right. Well, we'll make a start with the Apple announcement first. So it affects Windows users because often with their hardware where Apple go, other vendors like to go. So we'll see what that's going to mean. And I think there's some announcements on the operating system stuff as well. So first of all, I wanted to ask you about the chips that Apple are going to be putting on new devices. So currently it's all Intel, but it looks like that's going to change.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been inevitable for a while now. If you look how powerful the chips are, the ARM-based chips that Apple have been making for the iPads, the iPad Pro especially, they're so massively powerful now. It was a matter of time, I think, before they shoved on it into a Mac, and so here we are. I think in the end of this year they'll be replacing Intel chips. They're going to start. I mean, it's going to. I think they said it'd be a 2-year process. I think they said it's to actually phase out all the Intel Macs and phase the new ones. But yeah, it's Apple. I think again just cutting one more supply line. So they do like to be independent, and I think they've certainly seen with the iPads that the ARM chips are. Their Apple ARM chips are more than up to the job. So yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, we know that Microsoft have been trying to do this with Windows for literally years, and with, I would say, incredibly little success. Whereas Apple, they look like they're going to have all the inbox apps moved across. They look as though they're going to have support from other vendors there from day one. So I hate to say it, but I suspect Apple are going to probably do a better job of it than Microsoft have, because Microsoft, they had Windows, the Surface RT, that didn't work. They've had Windows on ARM, which is kind of sputtering away. I'm not sure that's going to ever really be successful, and maybe it will now this Apple thing has happened. But Apple, of course, have got form. I mean, they've done the big migration from Motorola to Power and then to Intel. So, and I believe they're going to have, is it, Gary, you might know better here, is it called Rosetta 2, I think, the translation layer? So they'll still keep Intel compatibility. Be interesting to see if they overcome the issues that Microsoft have had with Intel compatibility, where obviously it's only, whereas on the Windows for our machines, it's 32-bit Intel only. I don't know, Gary, if Apple are going to crack that, because Apple have made everyone move to 64-bit Intel, so presumably their Rosetta 2 must be 64-bit Intel compatibility, I would have thought. I don't know for sure.
I would have thought so. No, I don't know that for certain either. They haven't actually made that clear, but I would have thought so. And I think it's something they've got, as you say, they've got form on doing this, and I think they will come up with a very good emulation layer for it. Rosetta itself, the original Rosetta, was very good and worked.
It was superb.
I can't see them. Yeah, I think the one advantage they've got is that they do have a much more limited range of things they have to work with than Windows Microsoft does. It's a less challenging challenge for them because they know what they know what runs on Apple. They're limited
at this point, Gary, I'm going to mention Windows 10 2004 and Surface 7, and I'm just going to leave that out there. Just going to leave that there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but there is a limited number of devices they have to target, and a limited selection of the stuff with Windows does. There's a far more under the skin you can do with Windows than you can do with a Mac. I know some people may argue that, but the Mac has got a limited range, which is good in a lot of ways. It makes it a lot easier to do this sort of thing.
Yes.
And go ahead.
Sorry, Gary, come on.
I was just going to mention that obviously they've also built virtualization into this, which makes some of that easier as well.
Yeah, and I think in terms of, as you say, it's limited. What it's aiming to do. And I think did it also say that the iPhone and iPad apps will also be runnable now, sort of natively, which I think will also be interesting. Although how that will work with the non-touchscreen Mac, I'd be very interested to see that.
Yeah. Well, they haven't announced any new what the hardware is going to be like yet, so maybe
exactly. There were no touchscreens because that for me was one of the big things that were missing. Would they finally blink and say, "Okay, you can touch the screen now"? Yeah. All right, we'll let you do it. But they haven't done that yet. So I'll be intrigued to see how iPhone and iPad apps actually work on a Mac if you can't touch the screen.
Yes. It'll be an interesting challenge. I mean, they do work in emulators on the Mac. So I mean, at the moment, if you've got an iOS app emulator on the Mac, you can use the mouse to use them, and it works pretty well. So I don't think it's a major issue. You've got all the gesture controls you need with the type of the Magic Touchpad. So I don't really see that as an issue. One thing I just want to go back to the virtualization, because obviously one of the things we've been talking about a lot the last few weeks is the Linux subsystem in Windows. You're going to have a Linux subsystem in Mac, aren't you? With this virtualization.
Is that right? So you'll be able to run Linux apps on it, or Linux subsystem on it.
Yeah, you run a Linux subsystem, you run the Linux OS as virtualization. I mean, basically, I guess it's a built-in equivalent of the old Parallel software. Although Parallel isn't going away.
No, exactly. It's still they're very much there, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they've been working really closely with Apple on this. They actually had a demo of the Parallels desktop for Mac available. So you still be able to run your Parallels, run your Windows in there as well. But I think they're going to take advantage of some of the features, and it may be don't know this for certain, but I suspect it might be a smaller footprint application because they're going to have some native virtualization stuff they can actually use, which wasn't there before, effectively. So, yeah, I think this is really interesting, and certainly it's caused a lot of conversations in the developer community the last couple of days as to the way you go. I mean, one thing which I've had mentioned to me quite a few times in the last few days is, would you actually develop Mac OS software anymore, or would you just write iOS or iPad or Pad OS software and run it on the Mac?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it's Apple famously like to have complete control. So you can imagine there being one app store or Mac store, whatever, to serve all platforms with us, with the same code base. It'll be a lot easier for devs. And as you say, if you develop for Mac OS, it's a very, very small market you're developing for. Whereas if you develop for iPad OS or iOS, then it's a huge market which just happens to run on a Mac. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
So the are they do we know that the technicalities? Are Apple doing this emulation of Intel in the same way that Microsoft are doing on Windows 10? If you get one of the ARM versions of Windows 10, and you got that 32-bit emulation, which I know you should probably maybe 64 on Apple.
I have no idea. The answer to that question, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. I don't think the technicals of how it's actually working are that have been particularly well explained yet. I would, if Apple's past form is anything to go by with their move from PowerPC and Motor, I would think it will work. I mean, I hate to sound like a fanboy, but it will probably work very well. Probably a lot better than the Intel one, because the issue with the Intel one on the ARM kit, on the ARM kit, is that basically those apps all feel clunky and slow, and even with the Surface Pro X, it's still not seamless. It doesn't feel particularly slick. When you've lurched out of the ARM app into the Intel app, because suddenly things go a bit and don't work quite as well as they used to. Whereas I would think Apple will play it very, very cautiously, and they've got an awful lot of their stuff being ported. So, whereas, let's face it, Windows on ARM launched, and Microsoft didn't even have, the Chrome Edge browser out for it, which was ridiculous. So, there's lots and lots of Microsoft apps even now that haven't moved across to Windows on ARM. So you do wonder how seriously Microsoft actually take Windows on ARM. Maybe a bit more seriously now.
And do you think then that that will make the case that Microsoft will take it more seriously, or will they get better deals with Intel and almost the exclusivity with Intel, so that they get better optimization for Windows, and all the focus is on Windows because there's only Windows and Linux then would be running on it?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I doubt Microsoft as a company will care, because what they care about is if you're using their services. So I have been worrying a bit about Windows on ARM for a while now, and I don't think they're going to really care. I suspect they'll carry on as they are going. I don't think there'll be any massive investment in Windows on ARM. I think they're looking at some of the new Intel chips coming out. I think Windows will be fine on those, to be honest. So we'll see. I'm happy to be mistaken, and it's always good to learn.
And what's Apple's driving factor then to doing this?
I guess I'll go first, Garry, and you go. But I would think it's a couple of things. One, Apple likes to be in control of their hardware supply chain. There is that. There's definitely benefits from the ARM chips. If you look at how the iPads and iPhones work, they're certainly powerful enough, and I think, as Garry said, it gives you you've got a single platform, and that's a thing that I think Apple have been needing to do for a while now. Although I will just make one observation about the platform. We saw quite a lot of changes this week in the Apple desktop, the experience of iPad OS and iOS, and I think the level to which it was unified and all looked very consistent across all the platforms would make any Microsoft fan weep.
Yeah, indeed, and also any Windows Phone fan weep.
We'll get onto that in a minute. I'll need to open another beer for that.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right. What you were saying there, Richard. I think that to my mind, the two driving forces are control and cost. I think the Apple, since they moved to their own silicon, in quotes, on the devices, they've been able to control that, but also reduce the cost of those chips to them. There's a lot less patent costs on them for them, and lots of other stuff as well, which comes into play. And I think it makes a huge amount of sense not to pay Intel, but just to pay themselves effectively. Silicon. So I think there's a lot of that, but I do also think the unification is a quite important thing. I think there's something they've wanted to do. It brings a lot more apps to the Mac sphere. It makes the Mac a more attractive possibility for people who've got iPhones. They suddenly find all the apps they can run on the iPhone run on the Mac, Whereas at the moment, it's very difficult to find a lot of the iOS apps on the Mac. So I think that there's a lot to this.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how they're going to progress with that, and to see if Microsoft has got stuck with the technicalities, or whether a realization that perhaps they don't need to do it. They can just carry on as they are, like you said, Richard. There's no real worries about that.
One point I should quickly make on Big Sur, which is the next Mac version, is it doesn't run on a lot of old hardware. You virtually have to have almost a 1-year-old machine before you can actually run it. So there's a lot of people who bought machines not that long ago who won't be able to run this.
Yeah, and whereas you can run Windows 10 on a 32-bit 4 gig machine or 2 gig machine tablet from 2010 or whatever, couldn't you?
Yeah. And the funny thing is, if Microsoft did that, they said, okay, you're only going to be able to run the next version of Windows 10 on a 1-year-old machine, people would be absolutely up in arms about it. Whereas for Apple, they get away with it.
Yeah.
Well, indeed, yeah. So Apple fans, they actually have a love for the company that they'll just keep buying the stuff. I mean, I was very surprised that Catalina didn't do for them, really, because that was utterly disastrous. So hopefully they've learned from that, and Big Sur will not be the same disaster Catalina was. Because I guess one thing we could take from Catalina was that was kind of the big migration from 32 to 64-bit, and it's fair to say that Apple cocked it up dramatically. So maybe it won't be quite as open and shut as we think.
Yeah, there is that. I mean, that was a bit of a disaster.
I mean, even now, I see creatives saying, "Should I install it? Should I not install it?" I'm not quite sure what to do. I mean, I spoke to one Apple enterprise person who, was outraged when Apple began to push it down onto his machines without warning, and it was supposed to be blocked. So there is, I think, the enterprise issue as well. But we shall see what happens with it. Hopefully, it won't be as bad. But Big Sur, unfortunate name, because isn't that like a very windy road that if you go too fast you'll fall off into the Pacific?
Yep.
Metaphor, maybe. And when they previewed the OS, did you see anything in the design elements that you thought Microsoft should be taking note of?
Well, I mean, obviously with the Mac OS, there were bits and pieces. It's very nice. I mean, for me, it was more a case of just the unified design language. Microsoft have been banging on about Fluent for years now, and yet you still have a jarring experience in Windows 10 when you sort of leap from one bit to the other bit. It feels like almost 3 or 4 design languages crudely welded together, whereas I felt the Mac OS experience, which is now, isn't it Mac OS 11? I think it is.
Yeah.
OS X has gone. That did seem to be a lot slicker. Of course, dare we move on to iOS and what's happened to the iPhone and iPad interfaces?
Yeah,
triggering Jason. It's a shame Jason's not here. He'd love this bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, Apple invented live tiles.
Yes, Apple have invented live tiles after Windows Phone did them really well, and Android spent many years trying to make them work. Yeah, Apple has now brought them in as well. So yes, this is the ability to, instead of just a row of just dead icons with maybe a notification on them, you can now do things with them, make them bigger. So your calendar or your weather will expand instead of being the temperature. It will show forecasts and things, and your calendar appointments and things coming up. Just like we had in Windows Phone, except with much bigger black borders around each image. Yeah. It's a little galling if you are a Windows Phone fan, because it does, you think, well, it looks okay, but I think those around the edges are a bit big, really, aren't they? It looks like it's been bodged in there, really.
Yeah, it didn't appeal to me as a UX paradigm, but there we go. The way they've done it. There are a few good things in the iOS things. There's from the EV owner point of view, there's a couple of things which are quite interesting. There's the car keys thing. So you basically they're teaming up with a couple of the manufacturers to allow you to unlock your car using your iPhone. A bit like you could with Apple when they brought Apple Pay in to do your payments, they could bring in Apple Keys to do your car keys. No risk of theft there, sure.
Aren't they also adding a map view in as well for EV users?
They are. Now this is really interesting, and I was chatting to someone about this earlier. So this only actually works when you're on CarPlay.
So you can't plan to go to an EV charger offline. But as soon as you plug it into CarPlay, you can plan, and it'll bring up the EV chargers en route. So you can plan a journey, but you can't plan it showing the EV chargers. It just says, okay, when you actually want to go there, I'll tell you which chargers you want to go to. But they have got the relationships with most of the people who are actually doing EV chargers, particularly in the States. So the planning and also there is some talk they may actually put payment into there as well, which would be interesting. So or even potentially prepayment. You can book a charger and get there and charge. So that's not confirmed, but that seemed to be the way they were talking about it. So yeah, it's definitely some interesting options there. I mean, other than the lighthouse though, there wasn't much else in the OS that I really sort of latched onto.
Yes, I mean there was some fiddling around with the pencil, wasn't there? But yeah, I mean not so much really. I didn't think it. Yeah, the big thing was obviously the arm. Oh, and the watch will tell you if you've washed your hands for 20 seconds when you plunge your £400 watch under the water. Yeah.
Yeah, my there's an app for the Samsung that does that tells you to wash your hands and keep. They just got really irritated, so I turned it off. Yeah, so especially when I'm not leaving. I wasn't leaving the house. I get very annoyed. But yeah, there's a sort of a nice uniformity to it. I think that's perhaps what it is. That as Windows users, we always look a bit enviously over at, and don't necessarily like the design language that much, but you've got to admire the consistency for it.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't care for the weird rounded Fisher Price things, and I think it's a shame that there are such big, huge gaps to waste screen space. But yes, it is consistent throughout. Kind of in many ways, I guess. Like, perhaps I'm thinking back with rose tinted spectacles, but sort of Windows 8 and Windows Phone, where it was very similar in how it worked, even though the teams had done different things. In some ways, it was similar. But yes, it's not really reached the level that Apple have hit here, and it's the fact it's just happened. Whereas Windows have been messing around with Fluent for years, and it's still not happened yet. And it's just, you think there really is no excuse now. I mean, I understand your point, Garry, about hardware differences and the platforms, but really and truly, at least within Microsoft's own apps, you should have a consistent message now, and it's just not there yet.
And do you think Panos Panay's had a relatively short time at the helm of the Windows division? Do you think that's something that we can see change in next year as we move to the first round of updates under his watch? Yeah,
we'll see. I'm prepared to give him a little bit more slack here, because obviously the first round of updates that happened to 2004 hasn't gone well for the hardware that he showed off. I would like to have been in the boardroom when he addressed the Windows team about exactly what happened there. But since it is one person, I'm hopeful that he'll unify it. I am hopeful, but I think the clock is ticking, really. I mean, while I think the Mac will always remain quite a niche product, certainly if Apple keep on developing iPad OS the way they are, then there's a good chance that that may well become more of a entry OS than the Windows is. We'll see. I mean, I think Windows itself isn't under threat yet, but certainly shots fired.
Yeah, because we'll come back to Windows. Windows 10 and the updates later. There was one thing I was going to ask you while we're on the Apple stuff is have the EU gone in for an antitrust investigation over the App Store?
Yes,
week?
There was the whole the whole App Store for Ferrari, which I think kind of it hit the headlines, wasn't it? Because of the Hey email service, I think, which came massively unstuck last week. It was one of those fascinating stories to follow, because they made a huge big fuss, because obviously Apple makes substantial revenues from the App Store by charging you if you do purchases in the apps. Again, Garry, you're a developer here, so please chime in any time. But Apple makes a lot of money. Exactly, 30%. So if a customer subscribes inside your app, then Apple wants a cut of that every time, which is a big chunk of revenue. And I think Hey looked at they pointed out that the other apps don't don't suffer the same fate, and you could subscribe outside the Hey app, whatever else. And Apple said, "Oh, okay, fine. Maybe we shouldn't even have let your app into the store then." So it's kind of they doubled down at that point. But then it seemed that peace kind of broke out because I think was it Phil Schiller, I think, who explained what he wanted Hey to do. Excuse me, in order to have the app in the store. And it seems that Hey pretty much did it, from what I can see. So they had their bug fix issued version 1.02 on Friday, and then I think as of yesterday being Monday, they submitted their 1.03 version, which they you can now go into the app and create yourself a free account and do all the things. So they think they've now met Apple's requirements. I don't know what Apple's response has been, apart from to say that the developers can now appeal if needs be.
Developers could always appeal, but you always get your appeal turned down. I mean, I think the biggest problem from a developer point of view is you never know what Apple's policies really are.
Yes,
there's quite often. I mean, they're written out, but they quite often aren't written out in such a way you can actually understand exactly what they're going to reject you on, and it can be so inconsistent. I mean, I've actually had apps where it's been rejected, and I've just resubmitted it. I haven't even changed it, and it's been accepted. And the other thing is that the problem I really have with Apple is that they have complete control of what goes on the iPhone, which is a good thing in some ways. It means you're not going to get all the apps which are trying to steal money from you, etc. Going on, which sometimes you do find on platforms like Google and that, but it does completely lock you down. You can't get anything onto Apple unless you're into the App Store, and it gives them complete control over what they let on, to the point where apps I think are totally reasonable to go on are getting thrown out. So, yeah, I do have a bit of a problem with Apple's approach to the App Store. I think it's a bit too tight. I think some of the others are too loose, so it's a bit of a trade-off. But I just wish they'd be consistent. I think the consistency is the biggest issue.
And you can't help feeling though that depending on who you are as well, if you're an independent dev, then you've no sway or control or power at all. If you're a Disney Plus or Netflix or one of those guys, then you probably get a bit more flexibility.
Yeah, you can phone up your friendly Apple executive and get them to bypass the app, the regs. But yeah, and that has happened. I mean, I've even experienced that on one app I've worked on, which was for a fairly major player, and I couldn't get it into the App Store. I told the CEO of that store. He phoned up his mate, and it was suddenly in the App Store. So, and it shouldn't have been. To be honest, it was one which did actually infringe the regulations, but that's what the customer wanted, and I kept telling them it infringed the regulations. They're not going to accept it, but somehow they get them in.
You weren't working for NHS UK government. No, we don't need to talk about that they've even made it as far as the store. That story just reminds me of those.
A little bit of politics there.
Yeah, I've been in those meetings. I'm sure, Garry, you've been in plenty of those meetings when you've said there's been various people, salespeople, or whatever, and say, "Oh yeah, it'll be fine," and you go, "No," and like you just get roughshod over, and then 6 months later, it's, "Why didn't someone tell us this wouldn't work?" Hello.
Yes, the amount of times I've been sat in front of my TV this week saying that's not how Bluetooth works.
We knew that. I'm sure the consultants knew that, but I think sometimes, especially I guess with anything that's involved large companies and multinationals and governments, even worse, that it's not as simple as just saying, "No, this isn't going to work, mate."
Yeah. I just want to touch on one last thing about the Apple app thing, the devs. I don't know if either of you noticed, but did I see during the course of presentations that you would be able to choose a different email and browser app now in iOS? Was that a thing I saw?
Yep, that was.
Or did I imagine that?
No, you didn't imagine that. That's definitely there.
It wasn't wishful thinking, because that for me was a big thing. I thought, wow, that's quite a substantial thing there, really.
Mm. Especially. I've got a few users at work who have you've got this VMware security system, whatever, but it allows you to have to pick apps on the store and use them for your mail clients. And we've got quite a few now that are using Outlook instead of the Apple Mail app, and they prefer using it, but it's not the default. So being able to change the default is actually quite a big deal, I guess, on that one. And browser as well. I mean, I presume that they'll all use the same engine underneath, just as it does on Android.
Yeah, I would think so. It'll be the
Web,
Apple, because then is it WebKit? I can't remember now. But it is all the same underlying engine. Yeah.
Yeah, but just having being able to use Edge as your default instead, just like I do on Android, that's pretty good actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's in terms of the antitrust thing, well, I guess that's an investigation that's just kicked off, so it'll be a long process before we hear anything on that. But I think Microsoft have weighed in a little bit, not too specific, have they? But they've got a vested interest in this being opened up as well.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think, was it Brad Smith or somebody said that Apple's behaviour was probably even worse than Microsoft's software's back in the day. So, I'm not entirely sure that's true, but I guess one could say that in the US they're close to a monopolistic position. I mean, the thing is, around the rest of the world, they're not really, because the iPhone is not the major device or operating system in the rest of the world. It's mainly the US where it's quite as dominant as it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the point of the EU antitrust thing is that the fact that people have been complaining that Apple have a common definition in America, which means that you have to write apps for both platforms, and if you can't get onto the Apple, you're basically stuffed as a. So I think that I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But as Richard said, Apple do like their control.
They do indeed. They do indeed. Yeah. I mean, I was actually just sitting there, watching, see when these ARM Macs come out. Will that be the unifying app store, and there won't be any way at all of installing software apart from through the Apple-controlled app store? I was kind of waiting for that, but it didn't seem to come.
Yeah, I suppose they could do that eventually, but there's Mac users, just like Windows users, want to be able to install stuff. But they're probably a bit more app store friendly than Windows users.
I just think as soon as they move more towards iPad and iPhone, the iPad and iPhone apps and that way of working, I can just see, the traditional macOS apps going the same way. I just, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Apple says, it's for your own good. We're going to lock this stuff down. It will not be installable unless we've checked it, and that'll be good for you. And we'll take our 30%. Thank you very much. So.
And then how long before a MacBook becomes just an iPad with a keyboard and mouse?
I mean, this is a question, isn't it? Sort of your MacBook versus your iPad Pro, because the iPad Pro has got the Surface style keyboard now. So you do wonder. You really do wonder.
You do.
Maybe macOS is a transitional operating system to move people to iOS or iPad OS.
It will be interesting to look back on it in 2025, I think.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'll put I'll set the sky. I'll put a Teams meeting in for the calendar. Yeah, I mean, like, actually seems a long time off, but considering how long we've been doing this show, then that's something that we can definitely do.
Yeah, it'll fly by.
Yeah, it will. Yeah. Okay, so moving away from Apple, we have, as Windows insiders, have been lamenting the lack of features and changes in recent builds, and I think my theory about what we've been testing, it might actually be right. And because last week we had a new build of Windows 10 on the dev channel, even though it still says fast ring, but it's the dev channel. Yep. And we had a big jump from the 19 range or 19650 that we were in previously, and we were going up to 20150 and changed branch again to RS pre-release, which I believe is the iron branch. So we've gone away from the manganese, which was the previous lower build numbers. And my theory wasn't it, that the last few months on Fast Ring, we've been testing 20H2. And even though Microsoft say that the Fast Ring or dev channel isn't tied to a specific branch, but I think what they've been doing is they've been testing things for 20H2 in the Fast Ring, And then when they were confident with that was good enough for the the beta channel, they've moved that through to 20H2, which is what the slow rings beta channel got last week. And that's now freed up the fast ring to test other stuff that they want to test, which is actually for next year's build. Does that sound about right?
Could be.
Yeah.
No, because no one knows.
No one knows because the Windows team are so good at communicating.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that's why we've had so little features that they were getting through their backlog of 20H2 tweaks, we should say, not really features, are they? They were getting those all tested, ready, stable enough for the beta channel, stroke slow ring. That's gone in there now, and that's why we've been switched to the iron branch, which new stuff that is dependent on the iron branch can be then tested in the fast ring. So what we're potentially looking at is 21H1, but as we know, they're not tied to any specific features. So at some point, these features will be wrapped, whatever they decide is good enough, will be put together, and eventually that will be hit the slow ring as 21H1 when they put that in. So that means the iron or pre-release branch we've got has got some new features, and although it's a big leaping build number, it wasn't great leaping Windows features, but there were some interesting stuff, and I think some of the stuff that they mentioned a while ago and kind of let slip, wasn't it, that it was coming soon. And I'm thinking of the GPU for the GPU support for Windows substitute for Linux.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so this was the kind of this was trailed during the build event. They showed it off. And this is there was kind of two things they mentioned. One was obviously running Linux GUI apps easily, which isn't there yet really. But a big chunk on the way towards on the way to that is the GPU pass through. So you can run things like machine learning things in Linux, which is a very common thing to do, and you can now use the GPU of your PC if it's running a compatible driver, which most of the modern ones are now. So like the NVIDIA CUDA stuff can be accessed now. So I think that's the major thing. Of course, the other thing as well is which I think I'd heard this was going to actually be in 2004, but didn't make it in, which is the ability to update the Linux kernel outside of the operating system, which is again very important because you don't want to have to wait for a Windows update to get a new Linux kernel, because they're coming out all the time, and Windows, of course, you may be running the same version of Windows for 2 years, but you're going to want to have a new Linux kernel in your WSL2. So that's a thing which has also appeared, which I don't know. I thought that was going to be in 2004, but it wasn't. It's here. Hooray! Yeah. So you'll get that in Windows 21H1. And the other thing, of course, is it's now called 21H1, isn't it? They've dispensed with the naming of 2004. It's now going to be 20H2, 21H1. So it all makes much more sense, I think. So that's all good. But yeah, so the big thing is the GPU pass through for WSL2, which is great.
Yep. And they've made it a lot easier to install, haven't they, as well? So you've got the WSL install and WSL update commands.
Yeah, although to be fair, it was already easy to install anyway, so didn't really see it. It was okay, come on, man, that's good, fine. But it's always been very, very easy to get started with. You still have to do a few things outside, I think you've still got to do a few things outside of the command line to get the hypervisor environment going, I believe. So I think it's more just that -- install. But apart from that, it is easier. But it was always pretty easy, if I'm honest. I'm not the world's greatest coder, and I had no real problems making it work and bringing things up. It was good fun. Although, just want to point out, there is ever louder rumblings about WSL2, which is it's massively faster than WSL1. I think the guys from Phoronix ran some benchmarks which showed it running pretty much at the same speed as on bare metal. They run up Ubuntu 2004 on bare metal, and then under WSL2 on the same hardware, and it was near as damn at the same speed until, of course, you go outside of the VM boundary and try and get access to the local Windows file system. And then WSL2 is pretty bad. It's quite slow compared to WSL1, which is a shame. So I'm hoping they'll be able to address that fairly soon.
Yeah, and it does seem to be, like you said, they decoupled it from it's not dependent on the OS in terms of
the kernel,
updates. Yeah, so that they can ship those.
That's right, and you can also, if you do put a kernel on which you don't like, you can also roll back to the previous one too. So it's pretty well done. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I'm nitpicking there about the file system because, I'm a nitpicking person. As a whole, it's a very good system if you're a developer. Although that is again a very narrow niche of Windows users. Most Windows users won't notice this at all. That they'll never go near it.
And no sign of that GUI component for actually running the user interface yet. Is that's in the pipeline?
Yeah, I've seen nothing yet.
Yeah, and I think that was. I'm just trying to think what else was in that build apart from. In addition to that, I don't think there was a huge amount. There was a lot of fixes and only a few known issues.
Yeah, there were lots of fixes, sort of bug checks and things, and notepad fixes. There wasn't many issues really, but there was an unusual amount of fixes.
Yeah, I think they've got rid of the document privacy document that doesn't have an icon. I think that was one that's been there for about a year at least. That one in there, wasn't it?
That's been there for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's 3 known issues now. So yeah, I installed this on my Surface Go, no issues, and they installed it on the VM image, and no issues with that as well. What they have done as well, which is kind of unusual for Microsoft, is to release the ISO at the same time as well. Normally the ISO is a few weeks behind, so you can go straight. You can do a clean install with this, this Iron build, this 20150 RS pre-release anyway. So which is often handy if you want to do start testing and you don't want to drag an old image down and then have to upgrade it. So every now and again I kind of start from the beginning with the VM. So I think it's handy to have those ISOs, but usually they're a few weeks behind, but it's there already.
Good.
And I think now they've done that, they've opened that, they've got that channel ready. I'm just hoping that we'll start to see maybe some experimental UI features, or some of the things that maybe some of the UI from Windows 10X, that they can bring that into these test builds and maybe switch those on. I did see a few people tweeting about that there are a couple of registry hacks that will, or some, I don't know, a registry or some resource hacks that will actually, you can get the Windows 10X style notifications rather than the Windows 10 notifications. So it's not the code's there, it's just not activated. So it's possible that they can start to build some of that stuff into the OS and maybe switch it on for testers and get some feedback, and then switch it back off again and and analyze the feedback. So really what the Windows Insider program is for, to do some testing of features and things like that. So rather than just actual bug checking, bug fixes, just looking over for small issues. Actually try some A/B stuff out. But what they did said, like we mentioned, that I was pleased about last week, is they're not going to do this thing where they switch it on for 50% of insiders or something like that, because that was just very difficult to do any meaningful tests when you didn't know what was on and whether you were going to get this feature or not. So that, at least that's gone. I'm very pleased about that. So that was the changes for Windows 10 and 20. Surprisingly, I did a quick video of 20H2 because that's on the slow ring, and at last count, it's at nearly 13,000 views of my really small, really short video, because there's nothing to see really apart from it installs the new Edge on it, because it's under hood change. But people are interested in these videos, and somebody watches, so that's good to know, and you can see that on our YouTube channel. Right, what else do we wanted to fit into today's show? Oh, yeah, do you want me to just get the R2 music on now?
I think you should.
Yeah, definitely.
But then you can...
I'll avoid playing it so I don't get Simon Bates coming around claiming copyright on our YouTube videos. But I think he owns the copyright to everything everything to do with Romeo and Juliet, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yes. So this is Mixer, yes. Yes,
Mixer. 4 years ago, Mixer was it? It was called Beam, wasn't it? I think to remember.
Oh, I can't remember, because, like many people, Ian, I barely used it.
Yeah. Now I suppose I'm probably not the target market, game streaming, but we've seen like with Twitch and things like that, services like that, particularly with Twitch, that these are massive ecosystems. And I mean, I only see it from people like, you know, McLaren racing driver Lando Norris and his Twitch channel, and you know, he's got thousands of viewers on there. So Beam was the service Microsoft bought and then got renamed to be Mixer, and it is a game streaming service, I would say, community.
Yeah, I think basically it's kind of like Twitch, which is just a streaming service, full stop. But I think it was intended to be a slightly more advanced version of Twitch. I mean, perhaps I'm being unfair there, but that seemed to be really what they were trying to do with it. But yeah. So this is I guess yesterday with the Apple event and all the announcements, it was a good day to bury bad news, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Goodness me, Microsoft got that shovel out.
Yeah. So what they said is Mixer's going away, and they're inviting people to move to Facebook gaming.
I know, which I mean, it's a case of okay, so here's some bad news, and now here's some worse news. So, because I mean, you can't imagine people leaping to Facebook gaming, can you? Really, it's all a bit unfortunate, really. I mean, how much did they spend on Mixer? Because I know they paid for some streamers like Ninja and Shroud. They must have spent tens of millions of dollars on them, and but they never really got the audience, did they?
No, I wonder why. I mean, it would seem a sort of match made in heaven, a game streaming service for built into the Xbox. You know, the Microsoft have got all these Xbox services. They've got, you know, with Xbox Gold and Game Pass and all that. It would seem, you know, it was a natural fit to have a service built into it. But it's a bit like many other consumer stories. You just can't getting the users on there. Now, I do believe, from the comments I've seen, that it probably wasn't this case like perhaps with some other things that fail, like Zune or Windows Phone or whatever, where perhaps it was a technically better service. Like certainly Zune was a good system, but just didn't get the uptake because it wasn't first. I believe Mixer didn't have the same facilities as some of the other, like Twitch, so perhaps there was an element of that as well.
I mean, possibly. I think the other problem you got as well is just a sheer inertia, and the momentum of the other services. You kind of, when you're already launching from a very low point, unless you got something which rest of them can't do, you're probably going to have a problem luring people off. I mean, that's if we look at, say, Zoom as the video conferencing app, that had a thing that Skype, Messenger, WhatsApp couldn't do, which was really easy video conferencing, very, very simple. So boom, off it went. Whereas Mixer, I don't think ever had a really big differentiator. I mean, in fact, what they seemed to differentiate with was just by opening up the wallet and buying in talents. Of course, they've now spent their tens of millions of dollars, and all that talent is now quite happy to go back to Twitch, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope they enjoy that. I hope they enjoy their Ferraris.
It did seem a bit of an odd thing to, like, for all the symmetry we took with the Xbox and everything. It did seem a bit of an odd consumery thing for the Microsoft to get into, even 4 years ago, when Microsoft were very much switching focus away from consumer things. Well,
exactly, yes. I mean, a colleague who was writing a story on this asked me just to say, someone else has Microsoft killed, in the consumer business, and after about 10 minutes, he asked me to stop. So,
I'm certainly not alone in killing off services. Google are brilliant at it.
They are indeed, but Microsoft has got a particular way of axing things. But as you say, it's I guess the thing about Mixer is it wasn't particularly technically advanced over the competition. So it is a slightly curious as to why they felt the need to do it anyway.
Yeah, it's certainly not a core system. It's not part of a core system of Azure or something like that. But it just seemed to me it should work, shouldn't it, with gaming? But I suppose as we found with Microsoft now, they tend to be now optimizing the systems to work with the best on the market. So they just need to make sure that Xbox and PC gaming works well with Twitch, and that's it.
Absolutely.
So it's the same with those, the mixed reality headsets. I don't think they're trying, the new HP one. They're not particularly pushing the Microsoft Store element. They're just saying it works well with Steam, and because Steam's a good service, and that's the way it goes.
Absolutely, and of course, this I mean, the rate they're closing Mixer down is very impressive. I mean, Mixer's being shut down, I think, on in a month, isn't it? Next in July, so it's a really fast close down, which I think is
quicker than Microsoft Band went.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got to feel for those those streamers on the platform who've actually made an effort over the years to try and create themselves a channel, whatever else. So obviously, I guess they're being shunted to Facebook, are they? I'm not quite sure how it's going to work.
They're not forced to go there. It's a voluntary thing. If you want to go to Facebook, you can go to Facebook. Also, Facebook had to pick up the contracts if they were being paid to go there. So people like Ninja have, who was the biggest paid person on Mixer, have decided not to go to Facebook.
What a surprise!
and Facebook and Microsoft had to buy him out of his contract, which is interesting. So that's quite an.
Where I went wrong. I should have been on Mixer.
So that was a good thing from his point of view. Obviously, that not so much for Microsoft's. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, this whole thing. I mean, I think a lot of them I've seen a lot of them are starting to put Twitch channels up on their Mixer profiles. So I suspect most of them will end up back on Twitch.
Yeah, funny, yeah.
Great move for Ninja. I mean, he's been paid all these millions and he can go back to it.
I know. It is. I mean, it's astonishing, isn't it? Really, it's astonishing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, very good. A couple of things I wanted to fit into. We briefly mentioned about the Acer event. There was an Acer event today in place of the sort of product launches that they've tend to add at some events. They've had them at IFA and some other things. They've previously had press events that we went to, actually. Around this time, there was one a few years ago we all went to. That was quite a sort of theme park somewhere, wasn't it? That was pretty good.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
That was cool. I enjoyed that.
That was actually a very good event, that, because they actually had all the stuff there for you to play with. That's, a lot of press events is if you just sat there taking notes and then and then it finishes and you've got. But yeah, actually they had all the hands-on stuff. That was quite good a way of doing it. But anyway, obviously not possible to do any at the moment, that kind of thing. So they had a virtual event. I saw some of the sort of the tweets from it, but I was really busy, so I didn't really pay too much attention. But Garry, you said there's a bit of focus on rugged devices.
Yeah, rugged and health conscious stuff. I guess probably not climate stuff. So virtually everything they're doing is becoming antibacterial coated, which antimicrobial coated, which is basically antibacterial. So it wouldn't actually do a lot of good for protecting you against the stuff that's going around at the moment. But that's neither here nor there. But they definitely are doing that on all their newer products. For example, the new Swift 5, which I know is one of mine and which is favourite devices they put out. They've come up with a new version of that, and that's fully antimicrobial on all exposed surfaces. So that's quite nice. That was quite a nice device. The screen has a very thin but bezel. They actually called them ultra narrow bezels, and they certainly are. So, but it's actually one of the first ones that's got this new Intel Z architecture, and actually has an optional NVIDIA GeForce MX 350 chip in it as well. So quite a powerful little device for a thin and light thing. They mentioned a lot about Chromebooks. One of the interesting things they came up with in the Chromebook was they've got a new Chromebook which is in a 4:3 dimension, which is right. Which is, if you think about it, was how laptops used to be many years ago.
Yeah,
and it's been apparently led by demand for people who are reading A4 paper or equivalents on laptop screens, Chromebook screens. So there's a lot of people doing sort of university studies and school studies. That material is still in that format, and it's easier to read it on that format of a screen, which is quite an interesting thing. The one I particularly like though was the new Concept D series, Concept D3, which has an Easel Hinge, which is basically one of these hinges which has got bits on each side. Flip it up and flip it over. We've seen them in the past on old Windows CE devices actually, but it works really well for the artist type people, and this is definitely designed for the artists out there. But it's Pantone validated, so you've got really good color definition on it. They've also got accompanying monitors which are Pantone validated, which is great. Very useful actually if you're doing video editing, so you can see exactly what you're going to get get the other end. But yeah, it's really nicely designed. I like the fact that it's got a pen, but the pen's actually built into the chassis, so you don't lose it. And it just seemed perfect for that. It's like a mini Surface Studio.
Yeah, that was so. Yeah, it's kind of the hinge. You can actually have it at that sort of form factor. Yeah, like a mini studio. Yeah. It looked quite nice. I've seen it.
Yeah, so I really like that. And they also announced some gaming stuff as well. The Helios, new Helios, which looks very good. No mixed reality glasses or anything though. So
mention of that
no. So, but yeah, generally, I mean, evolution and innovation, but there wasn't anything which sort of said blew me away in terms of what they were releasing compared to previous years. I think they've done a lot of the really novel stuff in previous things. I said 4.3 didn't like that. It's 3.2 on that.
So that's the same as the Surface laptops. Well, so all the Surfaces like that, aren't they? I think.
Yeah.
4.3 is the old TV.
Yeah, TV. Yeah, that's what I was getting confused with. But yeah. They call it Vertiview, which is an interesting concept for a name. But yeah, so some interesting stuff.
The tough ones, the tough book type stuff, I think is quite interesting because there's not a huge amount of competition. And I was looking at one the other day to get one for use in a warehouse, and you've got the Panasonic Tough Books.
Yeah.
And that's about it really, and those ruggedized Windows tablets. And I think Lenovo might have some. But
I mean, this Enduro range does look really good. It's IP65 certified. MIL 810 G. So it's really it's got all the certification you possibly could want for it. They did some quite cool stuff on the video in terms of testing it and dropping it from great heights and trying to run it in a shower, which all works. But there's quite a few varieties. There's rugged notebooks and tablets. So yeah, looked for that market, and that market is huge. It looks really useful.
Well, you'll be able to perform your Teams meetings in the shower now.
Yeah.
save you in the morning, Richard. You'll be able to get straight in the shower when you no need to get up so early.
Yeah.
Well, I'm working back in an office now, so I'm commuting again. So I have to get up now and shower and dress and everything now. It's really inconvenient. Well, that's just about what we've got time for this week. One thing I did want to mention, I did a video a few months ago how to use Skype to do sort of friends video calling like Zoom, which Microsoft have got pretty they got right with Skype now, but only like a year late. But they've done that with Teams now as well. So if you've got just a normal Microsoft account, you can sign into Teams and host a video call or audio for free. You don't need one of the paid accounts for that, and you can schedule them, all that kind of thing. So I did a quick video of that today if anybody wanted to do that and not use Zoom. But I think that's everything I've got for this week. Is there anything else you wanted to finish off with, Garry?
No, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about.
Richard, anything from you?
Yeah, all good, thanks.
Right, well, where can we find you, Garry?
You can find me at Garry WMA on Twitter. That's Garry 2 R's, and I'll point you in a direction for everything else to do, like Fascinating Tech and the iPace Owner YouTube channel, etc. Yeah,
and now you can start going out with your car.
Yeah, indeed. Going places.
Yeah. Richard, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Richard_Speed.
And book shopping, I read.
Yes, indeed. Yes. I've the joy of the sort of partial lifting of the lockdown and the opening of non-essential stores meant I was able, wearing my mask, to go into a local bookshop. It was very efficient. They basically gave you the hand sanitizer on the way in, and you could have a look through the books. It was lovely, actually. You really can't beat a local independent bookstore.
No,
so
definitely not, no.
I would recommend that everyone supports their local bookshop because right now they need your support more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, we'll be back same time, same place next week. You can email me ian@thislife.com, at @Dixon on Twitter, and we'll see you next week.
Cheerio.
Yeah.
Thanks to Rich and Garry. We'll be back same time, same place next week. You can email me ian@thislife.com. I'm at @Dixon on Twitter. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.